a way of thinking. And now to bridge this into something else, I found quite fascinating, because here we're seeing this interconnection between these various ideas that sometimes look to be at odds with each other. But if you boil it right down, whether it's pagan ideas of the goddess or whether it's transhumanist ideas that man can ascend and become God-like, it really says this, that man, God, and nature, we're all one, and that's what we are trying to prove, and trying to prove so desperately.
So there's kind of a common thread that run through various religions, maybe even including atheism,
right?
That speaks to something outside the understanding of man that we need to achieve, at least to attempt to achieve. So I think we talked once upon a time about the common or the hidden keys within various religions that seem to be opened by a key now that, I say different locks that are opened by a key now that is common to all. So we have this, all of a sudden we have commonalities found between Buddhism and Hinduism, for instance, and even aberrant types of Christian, teachings that are floating around. And paganism and some of the occultic religions from the old days and some of the more modern theosophies and different cults and stuff, that they seem to have built into them some desire to conquer immortality.
Right. And this seems to be that theme that goes all through human history. You see this popping up over and over again. But today we are looking at the works of our hands, our science and our technology, as being one of those ways to achieve this ancient dream that we've had. That's why this new era that we're entering, which some call re-enchantment, this idea that we are now finding a new spiritual purpose, we are finding a new sense of meaning. That's why this is really an ancient future worldview, because we're pulling from the ancient past, those ancient wisdoms, and we're marrying it, we're combining it with the technology and the science that we've developed, which I'm thankful for. We're using science and technology right now. This interview is being done by Skype, and we're talking, even though we're on two totally different sides of the continent. But we're marrying all of this to prove that we don't necessarily need this God who's outside of creation. We're in charge of our own destiny. And that's always been the heartbeat of whether it's myself individually or you or anybody else individually. We've always struggled with that, and always society has always been moved by that. And so what we're seeing happening is collectively that same rebellion that's in our individual hearts is now just simply being acted out at a collective societal level. And of course, that has much bigger ramifications for people and for groups than just simply my own sense of hubristic pride. But it's this pride we have in humanity. It's this pride that we have within ourselves, that through our own works, through our own science, our technology, our rituals, our religions, whatever it may be, we will be enlightened and we will be as gods.
So I remember back in the 1970s and 80s that all of these discussions were basically metaphysical. There was in other words, there was no substance to it necessarily. It's just people talking about ideas and belief systems and so on. And there were just so many different groups back then that were discussing various aspects of these things. But I'm impressed by the thought that they were all pretty much just kind of metaphysical discussions at that point. They didn't have anything to hang their hat on other than what they had in their head. But right. When science entered a picture, and when science really began to advance and assert itself, these various groups had substance all of a sudden to hold out, not as a carrot, but just to hold out as proof, say, see, we told you, we were right. And now we have the means to achieve these things. And not only that, we're going to achieve these things. And of
right.
course, they, nobody can predict the future, of course, but they make a good stab at it, that they're going to achieve all these things. But they haven't achieved very much yet, have they, really?
No, they haven't. They haven't. At least in terms of, you know, at least in terms of something that's tangible that we can see. But what they have achieved, though, is they have achieved the fact that society has changed its mind, that we've entered a new worldview. They've definitely done a very good job at that. And so those metaphysical ideas that were bounced around, and then the concepts of science that came alongside of it, to all of a sudden offer that the direction that they needed. James Lovelock and his Gaia hypothesis was a great example of where all of a sudden science and metaphysics came together, and all of a sudden, poof, we have a new scientific theory that the Earth is alive and that the Earth is an organism, and that now we owe our allegiance to this organism because we don't want to kill her. That became all of a sudden a dominant scientific theory. Or hypothesis, which is really the best way of looking at it. And all of a sudden now, those metaphysical concepts that we as the Christian community laughed at and thought, oh, you guys are just crazy, this is a fad, 50, 40 years ago. I'm sorry, it's now the worldview of your children and your grandchildren, and they believe it. And they've built a sense of reality around this, and their science and their technology, which links them all together now in ways that was unheard of even 15, 20 years ago, demonstrates that we are all interconnected. And see, here's the proof: we're all becoming one.
Indeed. Carl, I wish we had time to just spend hours talking about this, because I think we could.
Oh yeah,
there's so much to it. And there's so many different splinters of it as well that are all related, but they're different, just kind of different slices of the whole pie.
right.
But clearly, one thing we can say before we end, just to kind of give the overarching thing on this, the whole move towards globalization and the implementation of technocracy and the implementation of a scientific dictatorship, if you will, via scientism, all of this stuff has been spilled over into the spiritual / religious community as well. It's been blended together. It's been one's propped up to support the other. And this is an important meme, I think, that people really need to get a handle on.
I agree, Pat. And in fact, unless we get a handle on this, a lot of other things won't necessarily make sense. And I think it's also important so that we ourselves, especially as Christians, watch our own denominations, our own church groups fall into some of these memes. I think it's important for us to understand so that we can put the brakes on and say, hold on, let's talk about this. You're going down a road that we really need to change direction with. I'm going to leave you with a quote, and I think it's an important quote from Jacques Ellul. Earlier on, you quoted a French philosopher from the 19th century. Here's one from last century, a French philosopher who is an interesting thinker. He says this: secularization is always an intermediate stage between a religious society on the way out and the appearance of a new religious structuring. I think he's right.
Oops, I think he is. I think so. Well, Carl, I thank you so much for your time, my friend, and I hope we can pursue this and other topics. Gosh, we never really talked too much about technocracy. We could have developed transhumanism so much more. It's all important, but to get a whole rounded, can I use the word holistic understanding of
Yes.
what's going on in the world, you need to study this stuff, folks. You need to pay attention to it. And if you don't, it's going to come back to bite you and people you love. So don't be passive about this. Be active and learn what's going on, and then learn to give an answer for the hope that you have within you, which, of course, would be a relationship with the God of the universe. In fact, that is the Lord Jesus Christ. So for whatever that's worth, wherever this podcast finds you, I hope you find it useful. And I hope you continue to follow the works of technocracy.news and myself, Patrick Wood, and, of course, my friend Carl Teichrib, who's a researcher and writer extraordinaire from Canada. You can find his works. Just go to the internet and search for Teichrib. That's a unique name. Not too many Teichribs running around. It's Teichrib, and you will find more stuff that will just blow your mind than you've seen in a long time. So, Carl Teichrib, thank you, sir, for being on. We will touch base again in the future on the Technocracy News Hour.